It's like I don't care about nothing, man. Yeah. Oh,
What's going on, guys? Coach Carr here, bringing you another video. This one is going to be going over pages 11 through 13. So we're still doing our angle relationships, and yeah, and this is little one. This is my parents' dog. She was just wanting some attention, so I picked her up for this intro. Okay, so the first problem that we're looking at is number 8 on page 11. It says, consider the figure below. Find the measures of angle AMS and angle CRF and justify each answer with the appropriate angle relationships. So this can look a little intimidating if you were just trying to figure it out just by looking at it. What I suggest doing, and what you're going to see me do in just a second, is to redraw it. So I would suggest even pausing it yourself and trying to draw it and see if it looks like what I did. So I will put that up in just a moment. Okay, so now I have redrawn it so that it's like we have two different sets of parallel lines with a transversal cutting through it. First one I'm going to find is angle AMS. So angle AMS would be this angle here. When I'm looking at it, the value I was given was 32 degrees here. So where they're both inside of the parallel lines, and they're both on the left side of the transversal. So this could be, consecutive interior. Consecutive interior angles are supplementary. So that means that they have to add together to equal 180 degrees. So if that's the case, if I go through my steps of solving this, so now I'll subtract 32 from both sides. And x is going to equal 148 degrees. So I didn't have to make it x, I just went ahead and made it x. So this angle would be 148 degrees. And remember that this was angle AMS. So this angle was 148 degrees, and we knew that we could set it up like this because it was consecutive interior angles. The next one here, when I'm looking at it, I'm trying to find angle CRF. Angle CRF is right here. The only value that's of use to me is this one here, which is 107. Now, I don't have an angle relationship with where they're at now. So like on one of the problems we did on the video before, I'm going to put 107 in all the places that I know it can go. So vertical angles tells me that this side must be also 107. Corresponding angles tells me this must be 107. Alternate interior angles lets me know that this is also 107.
My boy's wicked smart.
So now, if I'm looking at it, these two right next to each other form a linear pair. A linear pair has to equal 180. So I'm going to solve this one because of the linear pair. And a linear pair is two angles right next to each other that form a line. And we have 180 minus 107. And when you do that, you get 73. So angle CRF would be equal to 73 degrees. So the next problem we're looking at is page 12, number 11. This one says, consider the figure below where line 1 and line 2 are parallel and cut by transversals T1 and T2. Find the values of A, B, and V. Justify each answer with the appropriate angle relationships. So you'll notice a little pattern with me. Whenever we see two transversals cutting through, I'm always going to tell you, try to draw it so it looks more like what we're used to. So I'm going to pause this and write down the two lines with the two different transversals. My suggestion would be for you to pause it and see if it looks the same as what I just draw. So as promised, I redrew it. So you'll notice that when it's redrawn, so this one was the T1, this one was the T2 for the transversals. A and B are on this transversal. So we're going to be able to find A and B based on the 62 degrees that I was given. This one here, the only one we're going to be able to find is V, and that will be based on the 96 degrees that was given there. So first one I'm actually going to find is going to be B. The reason I'm going to already find B is because they're both on the right side of the transversal and they're both above their respective parallel lines. So this would be called a corresponding angle. Now hopefully from page 7 you remember that corresponding angles are congruent. So this too is 62 degrees. So B is 62 degrees. Now, knowing that B is 62, I'm going to be able to find A. Because if you look at A and B together, they form a linear pair. Now, if you don't remember about linear pairs, linear pair, when you add them together, they have to equal 180. So this plus this has to equal 180. So since I know that this equals 62, I can just do 180 minus 62, and that'll get me 118. So this angle right here would be 118 degrees. And I knew this because they form parallel, or they form a linear pair. Okay, so now we're looking at V here. Now I don't have an angle relationship for this, but that being said, I could move 96 somewhere else and have a relationship. So let's say if I moved it here, because of vertical angles, I actually have an angle relationship for this and this. That would be consecutive exterior. Now, hopefully you remember that consecutive exterior is one of our angle relationships that are supplementary. Supplementary meaning that they have to add up to 180. So if that's the case, to find V, I could do 180 minus 96, and that would get me 84 degrees. So up here, V would have to be 84 degrees. So I am going to go over just one more problem. On this one, it's going to be page 13, number 13. When the industrial shelves need to be accessible from either side, additional support is provided on the side by transverse members. Determine the relationship between each pair of angles and explain your reason pictorially. So we're basically having to redraw why, like 1 is congruent to 8, 1 congruent to 5, 3 congruent to 6. So we're going to redraw it to make it look like two parallel lines with a transversal cutting through it. So we will do that in just a moment.
How do I reach these kids? How do I reach these kids? How do I reach these kids?
So again, we're going to be trying to do these using pictures to explain why they are congruent with each other. So first one we have is 1 and 8. So you notice hopefully that you have these little triangles that are filled in here. That lets you know that they are parallel with each other. So let's say if I drew the top one here and the third one here. I'm going to pretend like the middle one doesn't exist, just to make it look more like what we're used to. If I were doing this, 1 would be inside of the parallel lines. 8 would also be inside, but it would be over here. This looks like one of our angle relationships. They're both inside the parallel lines, but on opposite sides of the transversal. This would be like our alternate interior angles. So these would be alternate interior if I were to redraw it so we only had this parallel line and this parallel line. The next one, they want 1 and 5. So we're going to use this parallel line and this parallel line. So I'll go ahead and draw those. 1 and 5 use this transversal cutting through. So I'm going to have it go this way. So 1 would be underneath this parallel line. So very similar to what we had there. And 5 would be underneath the parallel line on the same side. So if I drew that there, angle 1 and angle 5 would be there. They're both on the right side of the transversal and underneath the parallel line that they respectively are next to. So this would be called corresponding. So this would be our corresponding angles. The next one that we have is they tell us that 3 is congruent to 6. Well, if you notice, this is where everything's kind of meeting. So let's say if I even drew it like that. So let's draw both of these transversals and then the line cutting through it. So I'm basically drawing 3 transversals. I'm saying 3 is here, 6 is here, just like that. Well, they are directly across from each other, and when angles are directly across from each other, they would be called vertical angles. So these ones are congruent because they are vertical angles. The next ones that we have is angles 1 is congruent to angle 2. So if you notice, we have this box here, right? So the box tells us that it has to be 90 degrees. So we have this box and you have a line in here, and we're saying both sides are congruent. So this line down here must be called, this must be an angle bisector. So the little line, the transversal cutting through, would actually be an angle bisector because it cut it in half. So these two angles add up to 90, so they are complementary angles. So complementary angles, and in case you don't remember, this means that they add to 90 degrees. So with this one, we redrew everything to make it look like more with what we're used to. So when looking at it, I noticed that when I tried to use my dock camera for this one, the video was very blurry. So I am making sure to have it up here so that you can see it when it's not so blurry. So that's the end of this video. Now hopefully you notice that whenever you see one of these pictures and it doesn't really look like what you're used to, redraw it. When you redraw it, you can make it look like the two parallel lines with a transversal cutting through it like we're used to. But for practice, the homework problems I would like you to do is page 11, numbers 9 and 10, and then page 13, number 14. So those problems would be good practice for the test.